It's been a couple of months since Ryu left, and Izuku found himself sinking back into the ever-present darkness. The loneliness and depressing thoughts are slowly creeping back into his mind. He thinks that somehow he was destined to go through whatever short life he has, completely alone. Every day he tries his best to get by, to keep moving. His life may be short, but he'll do his damn best to live it to its fullest. It's becoming a sort of routine for him to sneak out late at night from the orphanage. People don't notice the way he carries himself differently now. Even if they do, they don't mention it. Although after a while, Izuku decided that it was time to just leave the place. Denji's tormenting was starting to get out of hand, and Izuku didn't have the patience anymore to just take it and move on. So a couple of weeks earlier, he moved all of his stuff, which wasn't many, to the warehouse, officially making it his home. He'd go out every night, dancing across the rooftops of Musatafu as he listened for any sign of distress. It was strange how calming it felt for him to be out there. People around the neighborhood where he patrols started to know him, and his name quickly spreads across the streets of the prefecture. Shadow was rapidly gaining the support of the public. However, this wasn't a good thing. With the recognition came the extra pursuit. The police is becoming a nuisance, and he hasn't been doing this for more than a few months. It was all worth it, though, knowing that his mother didn't die in vain. He knew he could handle anything the police threw at him. Ryu had taught him the beautiful art of evasion after all. Izuku started to treat it like a game of cat and mouse. Albeit unbelievably hard, it was fun nonetheless. The police department was getting more and more frustrated each time he got away. Still, he was getting better at it. Every time. The head detective in charge of his arrest was a well-known officer. Tsukauchi Naomosa is a simple man, respected for his efficiency and dedication. He even came to like the man after a while. The detective wouldn't admit it, but Izuku could tell that the man was having fun too. After all, Izuku wasn't harming anyone. He wasn't even really breaking the law, since the definition of a vigilante is someone who uses their quirk illegally to fight crime. Izuku technically wasn't using a quirk. He didn't know what his powers were, but they definitely weren't a quirk. He got used to leaving notes for the detective to find, whether it was clues on cases, leads on some criminals, or just some honest-to-God awful puns. That made him laugh every time as he pictured the detective getting them. Of course, he couldn't really write them on his own, so he'd usually print them beforehand. The warehouse, Ryu offered him, was proving to be essential in his late-night escapades. Honestly, Izuku didn't know what he would have done without it. Most nights, he'd finish his patrols with at least 1 or 2 injuries. He was still getting used to the whole fighting bad guys thing, and things didn't always go smoothly. So, having a place to take care of his wounds and rest was a blessing. Not to mention that the warehouse was a great space for storage, since his arsenal was only growing. The contact Ryu gave him was more than willing to make him whatever he wanted. However, the man couldn't keep doing it for free, so Izuku opted to find a part-time job. It was hard at first. No one wanted to hire the blind, quirkless kid, but after helping the owner get rid of some less than pleasant customers, the lady gave him a job at her bookstore. The bookstore was a relatively small cafe, yet it was welcoming and cozy. It had an ever-present calm atmosphere that was perfect for relaxing and enjoying a good book. Miss Eleanor, the owner, has even decided to turn it into a cat cafe. It was a place where people got to enjoy their coffees as they read or just played with the cats. It was perfect. The woman had also gone out of her way and brought some books in Braille for him to pass the time with. His shift was finally over, and his other job was waiting. After waving to Miss Eleanor goodbye, he quickly ducked into one of the nearby alleys, the night sky basing the world in darkness and hiding him from the world as he promptly changed into his costume. Going through the now familiar motions, he was done in a few minutes. He scaled the alley's building and swiftly took off running. The fresh air and the rush from the adrenaline made his heart leap. Soon enough, he found the perfect spot to check out the area. Settling himself in a seated position on the roof's edge, he strained his ears for any kind of unusual sound. At first, he picked up normal sounds: the barking of a nearby dog, the laughter of some children, the honking of a few cars, the screaming of a girl. Wait, what? He focused on the sound and quickly zeroed in on it. His senses all worked in overdrive as he pinpointed the incident's location. Without a second thought, he took off, following the screaming, like a beacon as he hoped he wouldn't be too late. From what he was hearing, it sounded like a young woman being robbed. As he finally arrived on the roof above the alley in question, he realized that the woman was actually not older than himself. Her figure was small and thin. He wondered what a girl her age was doing out alone at this time of night. He didn't have time to think about it, though, since he is deemed to act before anything serious happens to the girl. His attention focused on the man assaulting her instead. He was bulky, and his posture stiff. His right arm was raised, and the form was distorted, as if he had changed the physical form of his hand. Maybe a transformation quirk?
Now, big guy. Why don't you pick on someone your own size for a change?
He cooed darkly, his voice steady and menacing. He'd learned a long time ago to conceal his emotions in a fight. The man froze mid-swing, his head snapping up to look at the vigilante in shock.
None of your business, midget. Go find someone else to bother.
The man scuffed as he readied himself to proceed with what he was doing. His first mistake was thinking he could get away with hurting an innocent girl. Turning his back on Shadow? Now that was his second mistake. Izuku swiftly jumped from his place on the roof, landing in a rather brutal hit on the man's back, knocking the air out of him as he was pushed to the ground. Quickly, positioning himself between the man and the victim, he stood in a fighting position.
Run!
He ordered, his voice leaving no place for discussion.
Hide behind the trash cans, I'll get you when it's over.
He whispered to the girl. His only response was a small whimper and the sound of running footsteps. The man grumbled as he tried to get back on his feet, barely making it halfway before Izuku kicked him down again.
Give up yet?
Shadow asked innocently, his head tilting to the side, reminiscing of a curious cat.
Damn brat!
The man spat, rushing at the vigilante, a war cry resounding through the alleyway.
I'll take that as a no.
Izuku quipped as he swiftly sidestepped the man, dodging the angry bull with little to no effort.
I'll kill you for this!
The criminal yelled once more, making another move to run at the vigilante. Izuku at least has to give it to him. The man was stubborn as hell, getting bored with the whole interaction. Izuku took out one of his eskrima sticks, charging it with electricity. He waited for just the right moment before hitting the man in the thigh. The man wheezed in pain for a moment before he crumpled to the floor in a motionless heap. Doing quick work of tying the man up and leaving his usual note to the detective, explaining what the man has done. He made his way to the shaking figure peeking from behind the trash cans.
Hey, it's okay now. You can come out?
Izuku said tentatively, the steel and venom in his voice gone as his protective instincts took over. The girl got up from her crouched position on shaky legs, swaying a little before steadying herself.
Okay, so first of all, what's your name?
Her body racked with tremors as she tried to speak.
Uraraka!
She answered weakly.
Okay, I'm Shadow. Now I need you to breathe with me, Uraraka.
He emphasized his request by inhaling and exhaling out loud, waiting for the girl to follow his motion.
Does anything hurt? Did he injure you in any way?
Was I too late? He asked, worry laced in every word he said.
No, I'm okay. He didn't hurt me.
The girl mumbled quietly.
To thank you for saving me.
Her voice wavered at the beginning but eventually settled in a steely tone. Although he couldn't see her eyes, he could practically feel the determination burning in them.
Oh, don't worry about it.
Izuku waved his hands nonchalantly, dismissing the girl's thanks. He wasn't doing it for that. He heard someone calling for help and he came.
Do you have a phone on you by any chance?
Yes.
She stuttered, not expecting the change in subject. Quickly taking out her phone from her front pocket.
I need you to call the police and tell them what happened. I'll stay with you until they come. But I can't be here when they get here, okay?
Izuku knew that waiting for the cops to come would be risky, but he couldn't leave the girl alone. That reminds him. He looked at the girl as she finished talking with the officer.
Why were you out here anyway? Don't you know it's dangerous to be out here at night?
He asked slowly, trying to sound as calm as possible.
I got lost on my way home from the store.
She whimpers as she explains, and Izuku feels a pang of guilt for reprimanding her.
It's okay. It wasn't your fault. Your parents shouldn't have left you to come home alone anyway.
He replied quickly, trying to appease the situation. After all these years, he can take down people stronger and bigger than him in a fight, but he can't deal with people his age. He was really pathetic. He was almost 13. Damn it! Why couldn't he control himself? His train of thought was cut off as sirens resounded from a distance. Quickly waving at the girl and making his exit, he scaled the building and ran back home. This was an interesting day. Now, standing in front of the pro-hero Eraserhead, Izuku thinks he did well. It's been 2 years since Ryu left, and Izuku managed to make a name for himself as the mysterious vigilante Shadow. However, this didn't mean he was going to give up that easily. Raising his hand in a gesture of mock surrender, he slowly edges backward. Each step he takes, the hero takes too.
There's no way out this time, Shadow. Give yourself up, it's over.
Eraserhead's eyes are glowing red. Previous encounters and his research on the man tells him that the man is trying to use his quirk on him.
That won't work on me, so you can blink or whatever.
He finally speaks up, a tinge of amusement in his tone. Shock envelops Eraserhead's features, but the hero manages to steel himself again, his face going back to its blank expression. Izuku curses himself internally for forgetting his voice modifier.
What to—
Before the hero can even finish his sentence, flash grenades are tossed in his direction. The light blinded the hero and made him blink. Eraserhead tries to erase Shadow's quirk as the vigilante swiftly scales the building's wall, but to his surprise and confusion, nothing happens. Shadow didn't even falter at having his quirk erased.
Sorry to cut our little meeting short, Eraserhead. See you around, hero.
He calls out as he retreats into the darkness. Unknown to him, the underground hero had finally managed to learn something about him. Now Mosa knew this was a long shot. Apprehending this man wasn't going to be easy. He had managed to escape their grasps for 2 years after all. So, he isn't that shocked when he doesn't receive the signal from Eraserhead, nor when he sees the vague silhouette of the vigilante running off in the distance. He sighs as he finally gives his attention to the man sitting in front of him. They're in his office. The hero is giving him the report on tonight's events.
So, did he speak to you? Did he tell you anything important?
Now Mosa asks curiously, because in 2 years, they never heard the man's voice except when it was through a voice modifier of some sort.
Tsukauchi, I think Shadow is a kid.
Aizawa still can't erase that voice from his mind. It was so small, soft. This wasn't the voice of a grown man. This was a kid's voice.
Are you saying that the man we've been chasing for 2 years, who fought and took down countless villains, is just a child?
And this. This is the turning point, isn't it? This kid, he's seen and done so much. No kid should be put through that. Are you sure about this?
His voice. Yes, I'm certain.
Oh my God. This opens up a whole new set of questions. This changes everything, actually. Why would a kid put himself in these kinds of situations? I've seen him fight. He's better than most pros in the way he carries himself. It doesn't make sense.
He told me not to bother using my quirk on him. Said it wouldn't work.
Aizawa ponders for a moment.
It didn't. I didn't feel the tug I usually do when I erase someone's quirk. Even mutant types send off some kind of signal.
Do you mean, is he quirkless?
Shock and disbelief are edged in the detective's voice.
I honestly don't know. His movements and his reflexes. Do you think that his abilities are natural?
Naomosa squeezes his eyes shut. He can already feel the headache this kid is creating. Shadow proves to be a bigger mystery than previously expected. Izuku walks to his 2 o'clock shift at the cafe. He sips absent-mindedly at his newly acquired hot chocolate. He would have brought a coffee, but he had a sudden craving for chocolate. Oh well, who could blame him? He smiles sadly as he remembers the movie nights he'd spend with his mom. She would make the best hot chocolate. She'd always put at least 2 marshmallows in it, too. He shakes himself out of his stupor, and his mind wanders to last night's events. Eraserhead had almost caught him. It was too close for comfort. One mistake and all of his work would have been for nothing. He needs to be more careful when choosing his patrol routes. It has been almost a year since the underground hero started pursuing him. His life has been harder every passing day. Eraserhead sure is stubborn. However, he can't deny the fun he has every time he runs into the tired-looking man. His ears pick up on a strange sound. It sounds like a fight is going on in one of the alleys nearby. He's so caught up in his train of thought, his mind focusing on the commotion that he runs straight into a person. He curses under his breath as his balances tips and he falls flat on his butt. He hears the telling sound of splattering liquid as his cup slips from his grasp, and he thinks he smells coffee beans. Apparently he has cost the person their drink too, speaking of. The figure, who he now realizes must be a teenager, maybe his age. He can't be sure. Turns towards him sharply.
Hey, watch where you're going.
His words die in his throat as he seems to finally notice Izuku's cane and tinted glasses.
Oh,
Shinsu watches as the boy that just ran into him gets to his feet, dusting himself off. Thankfully, none of the drinks had spilled on any of them, however. His newly acquired cup of coffee was sadly wasted to the ground.
I'm sorry, I wasn't really paying attention.
He apologizes, bowing slightly, and Shinsu can't help but feel like a complete jerk.
I should have been more aware of my surroundings.
The green-haired boy rambles as he shuffles from foot to the other. The boy has messy dark green hair. He's short, but seems to be well built, and muscles can be seen even under the black hoodie he's wearing. The kid holds a red walking stick in his hand, and Shinsu thinks he can see a scar that slits the boy's left eye vertically.
It's okay, just...
He sighs loudly. He's never been good at social interaction, and outright yelling at the blind kid didn't really make the interaction less awkward.
Be more careful next time.
Izuku nods his head profusely, trying to convey his regret and apology. However, the scuffle he heard just a few seconds ago has stopped. Silence was never a good sign in a fight, so he had to go. Yet it felt like he owed the boy in front of him something. It was his fault that the kid's coffee was now spilled and wasted on the ground. So, before he can even talk himself out of it, he speaks up.
Again, I'm really sorry.
Shifts his walking stick between his hands, a nervous gesture he'd come to acquire over the years.
I work at a shop nearby, and if you'd let me, I'd like to make it up to you. It's on the house, and the coffee is just a few blocks from here.
He senses the shift in the guy's demeanor, signaling some kind of shocked response. Silence is his only answer, and if not for his enhanced senses and the guy's heartbeat, he would have thought that the kid was gone.
I'll consider it.
The kid mumbles and promptly walks away. Izuku notes that the guy's heartbeat is steady. He waits a couple of seconds before dashing off. He has a fight to investigate and stop after all. It's 4:30 p.m., and Izuku thinks that the stranger he literally ran into earlier isn't coming. However, it's not 5 minutes later that he's proven wrong. He hears the now familiar chime of the door's small bell, and the same scent of coffee and lavender accosts his senses. The figure goes in and sits on one of the small couches. He's barely in his seat, and two cats have already taken a liking to him. One of them finds a perch on his shoulder, and the other uses his lap as her personal naptime bed. The boy doesn't seem to mind and just picks up the menu from the table and reads it. Shinsu doesn't know what he expected when he decided to check out the place. At first glance, Mirakuru, the shop's name, seemed to be a regular cafe. However, what pleasantly surprised him was the fact that the cafe turned out to be a cat cafe. He went inside and looked around, deciding on a seat on one of the comfortable-looking couches, happy that the cats here seemed to like him instantly. He picks up the menu and decides on what drink he'll have. Yet, he can't help it when his eyes wander from the menu he was looking at and towards the counter. There, a familiar mop of green grates him. The boy seems to be washing something at the sink, and Shinsu's respect for him increases slightly. Because he can't believe how hard it must be to work at a place like this, blind. He watches as the boy works in smooth, fluid motions. His hands and body move as if he knows exactly where everything is and isn't hindered in the least. Not long after, the brunette walks towards his table, a small tablet in hand that has the cafe's logo on it.
Hey there, I'm glad you came.
Comes the way too cheerful voice of the semi-stranger. Shinsu is flabbergasted for a moment because what the hell? How did this guy know it was him? He expected him to treat him like any other customer, since he didn't even speak yet. Was the guy really blind?
Yes, I am blind if you were wondering. The name's Midoriya Izuku. What's yours? I don't want to keep calling you the coffee guy in my head.
He mumbles the last part bashfully, his hand instantly coming up to rub the back of his head in a nervous motion. How did this guy know what he was thinking?
Shinsu Hitoshi.
He introduces himself in a monotone voice, proud of the way he succeeds in masking his shock.
Well, Shinsu, it's nice to officially meet you. What would you like to drink? It's on the house.
I can pay, you don't have to, and I'll take a medium frappuccino.
Nonsense. I told you to come so I could make it up for running into you and wasting your drink.
Midoriya is silent for a moment. He seems thoughtful, and a brief expression of guilt flashes through his features.
I'd like to apologize again for earlier. I don't usually get distracted like that.
He says that, and somehow Shinsu believes him. Given the way he was moving earlier, Midoriya seems to always be focused.
Hey, don't worry about it. It's okay, I should have been looking where I was going too.
Well, I'll be right back with your drink.
The afternoon passes smoothly, and eventually, it becomes a habit for Shinsu to come here for his coffee in the afternoons. Weeks pass. Shinsu walks into the now familiar setting of Mirakuru. However, he's surprised that Midoriya isn't here today. He orders his coffee from an old lady at the counter. She tells him that Midoriya's shift was in the morning this time. Instead of sitting in his usual spot, he opts to go to one of the nearby parks. He kind of was looking forward to his small interactions with the other teen. Every time he went there, they would make small conversations. They'd talk about simple things, sometimes going on and on about the Hero Society. They never talked about anything too personal, though. Midoriya seemed just as privy and sensitive about some subjects. He doesn't know what he considers Midoriya. Was he his friend? Could he really call him that? The green-haired teen didn't know yet about his quirk. Shinsu couldn't help but think that once he found out, he'd want nothing to do with him. In the society they lived in, people judged a person by their quirks. They'd decide their fate as soon as they turned 4. A powerful quirk leads to having a good life. People respected you. They'd judge people on whether the power seemed heroic and useful enough for them. A person like Shinsu was considered villainous. People feared him and deemed him destined to be nothing more than a criminal, ever since he turned 4 and got his quirk. He had a brainwashing quirk after all, the ability to control a person based on a verbal response. Shinsu learned a long time ago not to expect much from people. Why would Midoriya be any different? His mind blanks as he suddenly notices the mop of green hair that's sitting on the park bench in front of him. The boy was wearing the same cloth he had on when they first met. It left Shinsu wondering if the boy had any other clothes. Midoriya is sitting alone on one of the wooden benches. In his hand is the red walking stick that Shinsu's gotten used to seeing and a small book. His shoulders are hunched forward, and he seems to be lost in thought. However, when he gets a closer look, he realizes that Midoriya is actually reading. His expression focused as his fingers move over the braille in his book. Shinsu's feet move before he can stop himself. He finds himself walking towards Midoriya. However, as soon as Shinsu takes a few steps forward, Midoriya's head turns sharply to his direction, and he can't help the shivers that run through his spine. Because at that moment, it felt as if Izuku not only looked at him but looked through him. Sometimes, Shinsu wonders if the boy was really blind.
Shinsu?
Comes the hesitant voice of the barista. He gets up and somehow meets him halfway.
Hey, how did you know it was me?
Lucky guess?
The answer didn't really satisfy Shinsu's question, but he moved on anyway. He didn't have any other explanation after all.
So, what are you reading?
He asked as he took a seat next to the green-haired teen.
Work theory, the evolution of heroes.
Izuku mumbled, his cheeks flushing in embarrassment.
I'm kind of a huge nerd when it comes to this stuff.
You like heroes a lot, don't you?
Everyone liked heroes. They were the pillars of their society.
Yeah. I wanted to be one for so long, it's impossible now.
Shinsu noticed the way Midoriya's posture stiffened, his shoulders hunching down and his voice taking a dark tone. The teen spoke as if it was the absolute and irrefutable truth. They sat in silence, Shinsu not really knowing how to respond. Because what would he say to this? The boy in front of him seemed like he'd lost any and all hope of ever accomplishing his dreams. However, before he could even come up with some sort of response, Midoriya spoke again.
What about you? Do you want to be a hero?
It was his turn to stiffen now. Because he did. Didn't he? He wanted to be a hero more than anything but with his quirk. Shinsu guessed that now was as a good time as ever to tell him.
I do, but I can't.
He settled on this response.
Why not?
Well, for starters, my quirk is brainwashing. I can control people if they respond to me.
Shinsu turned away after that, not wanting to see the inevitable change in his new friend. He'd seen it so many times before. The exact moment people decided that he would never be anything more than a villain. The exact moment fear overtook their expressions and their friendship was ruined forever. He didn't want to see that look on Midoriya.
So cool.
The other exclaimed excitedly, startling Shinsu, his head whipping towards him in disbelief.
Your quirk would be so useful in hero work? Just imagine the hostage situation you could stop with only a couple of words. The villains you'd stop without even resorting to violence. Why would you even doubt yourself? With your quirk and your kindness, you'd be a great hero, Shinsu-kun.
The earnest and honest response coupled with the sheer sincerity of Midoriya's words made his breath catch in his throat. This was the first time anyone ever believed in him, believed that he could be a hero. Midoriya didn't even hesitate to talk to him, even after he learned about the nature of his quirk. It left Shinsu speechless. He realized after a moment that Izuku was still rambling about the possibilities regarding his quirk. He couldn't help but ask the thing he's been yearning to ask ever since he got his quirk.
Do you really think that my quirk isn't villainous? Do you think that I can be a hero?
His voice was barely above a whisper, his nerves getting the better of him, as for once in his life he had hope for the answer he always wanted to hear.
No quirk is villainous. It's the user's choices and intentions that make that decision. I don't think you can become a hero.
He paused, removing his glasses, and for the first time, Shinsu saw the boy's emerald eyes. They were a dull shade of green, but they seemed to carry the light of the world in them as the boy finished his sentence. No trace of hesitation or doubt in his tone.
I know so.
Shinsu, for the life of him, couldn't keep it in anymore. He tried to keep his expression neutral, his face blank. He really did. But at that moment, he didn't care to keep up his facade anymore. He cried, tears flowing freely from his eyes as he felt all of the emotions he tried to suppress rise to the surface. It felt like a dam had broken and it wasn't going to be fixed anytime soon. Izuku, throughout his breakdown, just held on to him. A silent, yet steady comfort. A promise of support and friendship through it all. Shinsu was glad for whatever higher force made them run into each other that day.